Welcome to EDTalks. Super excited to talk about a new topic that we haven't touched on before, really around the realm of outpatient surgery. And there's no one better in this world to have that conversation with than my friend Varun Gadhok. Varun, welcome to EDTalks.
Thanks, Ed. You are too kind. I've been looking forward to this and excited to get started.
Yeah, you're a great leader and you're working for a great organization. And so I'm just thrilled about it. And I know that we met a few years ago, pre-pandemic, maybe 2018. And yeah, I remember we both are in the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex. So we found like a place in between, a common friend brought us together and we just hit it off. And of course, we have a lot of commonalities with our Indian heritage and things like that. So we really had a great time. We've been friends ever since. And I know we've met at least one other time, maybe twice. I think one time in Grapevine and right around Grape Fest because we couldn't, all the parking, we were both shocked because we were like, the restaurant was right in the middle of the no car zone that had been established for Grape Fest. And, but we both found it eventually.
You have a great memory. I think you were at Cleveland Clinic at the time.
Yeah.
I had heard you speak a long time ago when you were the CIO at THR. And so when I heard you speak, I remember thinking to myself, there's someone I want to get to know. Just small world out there, healthcare IT, both of us in the same area. So glad we got an opportunity to connect.
Yeah, we're really blessed in Dallas Fort Worth. There's some great healthcare organizations and great people, and everyone's like willing to share and talk and meet up. So that's pretty cool. Hey, tell me about the best customer experience you've had this year, and it doesn't have to be healthcare; it's just general. I'm always curious, like of some good experiences.
You know, I've had, some good experiences with uh automation, and one time I had an issue with my credit card and I called in and didn't have to speak to someone, but really what I value is human touch. And so I used to hate going to get my hair cut. It was a chore, and you get there, you sit down, you don't know how long the wait's going to be. Sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's an hour. And I'm just waiting to get done with the process. And I ended up changing locations, and I found a barber that I really like. And so it went from being something that was, I just couldn't wait to get over with, to something I look forward to. And I think it's just that human touch. It's conversational, just like you and I are talking, right? We
Yeah.
pick up where we left off. And before you know it, the time's gone by, and I look and feel great, but more importantly, I feel energized because it wasn't a chore and I look forward to it. And so I think the human touch in the age of technology is still really important.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I still value, that relationship, and look forward to what was a chore to now something that I look forward to going to do.
Yeah, that's really good. It's like Cheers. I don't know if you were old enough to remember that show, but that was the connection. Everyone knew my name, and I could like just be myself and chill. And yeah, that's cool. What's one thing your parents forced you to do that, looking back, you're glad? You probably weren't back then, but maybe now as an adult, you're like, I'm kind of glad they did that. Is there anything like that?
Yeah, it's something I'm trying to instill in my son as well. I've got a 9-year-old, but things like manners, being polite, especially talking to elders with respect. That was something that was very common in our culture. And so, having respect for elders, and being punctual, right? Like showing up on time or ahead of
Yeah.
schedule. Some basic things that we can all control, right? And I think because my mom instilled that in my brother and I when we were young, it just kind of stuck and became part of who we are. The other element of it too, Ed, is watching. When we moved to the States, I was 11 years old. My brother was 7, and we came from a single parent household. My father passed away; he was in the army. My mom never remarried, and so I watched her struggle, right, financially, and relocating, uprooting from India to come over here to give us a better opportunity. Both her brothers lived here, and it was something that was my father's dream. He didn't get to live it out, but what I watched her do was just a lot of grinding, hard work, right? She was working a lot of hours, taking care of 2 kids, while we're adjusting to a different country. And what that really instilled in me is also the value of hard work and just that grind, right? And I think that's something that all of us can control. And so I'd say those are kind of the things that I think about my childhood that are normal today, but certainly didn't come easy. But that repetition and sticking to it and watching your parents be that role model helps reinforce that.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good. That's powerful stuff right there. Varun, you've already shared a little bit on the personal side. You want to share a little bit about your story, both personal and professionally, like, and what got you to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, I was young when we moved here, and I was like many kids with single parent households. I maybe wasn't the best student at the time, and my mom was working a lot, and so I had an opportunities to kind of get myself into areas that maybe weren't the most productive, right? And as teenagers often do. And it was my grandfather who was in many ways like my father figure on a personal level, and he passed away around the time when I was 17, 18. And I remember dropping everything and flying out to see him because he really had a level of wisdom that I didn't see on a normal basis growing up. And what I mean by that is he taught me to make the right decision, not the popular decision. And that really kind of stuck with me. And so when he passed away, it was sort of my wake up call to say, what am I doing with my life? Where do I want to be? And what are the values that kind of, he instilled on us? And I didn't want his legacy to fade away as that would organically happen over time. And so that it was like an overnight switch. When I came back from that trip, I just instilled this drive in me, and I still have it today. And hopefully, I'll continue to have that as I age. But that drive allowed me to just reinforce the values that I shared with you earlier today that my parents instilled, and embrace it rather than resist it.
Yeah.
And so I started off switching to the career side. I was an introvert, a big time introvert at the time. And so I got into IT out of college just because I thought, hey, I don't have to interact with people as much, and I'm good at it. I enjoyed the technology side. And so we've heard this phrase, people process technology. I started off in technology, and eventually I started getting into processes in my middle management. And then in senior management, I graduated to the people side. I think I always wanted to be a people person. I just had a fear in me on how to do it, how to be effective at it. And you've probably been in meetings, especially when I was young. I vividly recall someone would ask a really tough question, and you would say, "Boy, I'm glad that wasn't directed at me." And you hear someone else respond, and you're like, "Wow, I want to learn from this person." And so I think a lot of the success that I've had is because of the people I've surrounded myself with and partnered with over time. And even you're an example of this, right? I remember when we met for Starbucks at Starbucks, you shared with me your values and your keys to success, and one of them was go to grow.
Yeah.
And I was taking notes because, again, going back to that wisdom element, I think it's important to learn from others and then apply that into your own value system, however it fits. And so that's a little bit about my personal life and my career. Been at Surgery Partners now for 2.5 years, but been in healthcare IT for 18 years.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that's a great story. And I appreciate your authenticity and your transparency and willing to share. Yeah. And when you left your last organization, you went to Surgery Partners and you're the CIO.
That's right.
So that's pretty awesome. I love stories like
First
that.
time CIO.
Say again?
First time CIO.
Yeah, first time CIO. So you started at Cerner, right? Out of college, right? Because you always hear about people going to Epic. So I never met someone who went directly to Cerner. So that's pretty cool. How did that happen? Like, were they recruiting on campus? And you're like, yeah, wow, yeah. Tell me about it.
So when we came to the States, we lived in Iowa, which is where I grew up. So I went to University of Iowa, and I think they were recruiting a lot of the Big Ten schools at the time. They're located in Kansas City, so it's real close to proximity, or they were located in Kansas City. I'm not sure if they're still there now, but yeah, so they were growing at a very fast pace, and I was part of they called it Compass orientation, and it was week long, and you had 40, 50 people as part of your cohort, and they just every other week they're just bringing in this mass amount of what were just students into the professional life. But yeah, so I interviewed with them on campus, had a couple of other opportunities, Kansas City appealed to me because it was close by. And I also wanted to kind of get out of Iowa and just try something, just blaze my own trail, if you will. And so that's how I wound up at Cerner.
That's cool. And so then you were a tenant for eventually you had a couple of things going on, and then eventually you made a tenant where you stayed for a long time. And then you made the move to Surgery Partners. I ask you this next question, Varun, just because people, especially those who are younger in their career, would kind of want to know is so how did that sort of happen? Like you sort of had this something inside of you that I want to be a CIO. I want to look for this opportunity. Where I am may take a while. And here, like how did that happen and what was the thought process?
Yeah, it started with the fundamental question of like, how do I learn? How do I continue to learn and grow? Right. And so anytime I hit a point in my career where I felt like my growth was not being challenged, personal growth, professional growth, and I looked for a change. Right. And so after Cerner, I moved to Dallas and I went to go work for Perot Systems, Ross Perot's company, which got acquired by Dell. I was there during that acquisition, and now they're owned by NTT Data. And that's when I got exposed to Tenet. Tenet was my customer. And I worked there for about 5 years. And I realized that I've worked on corporate side at Perot with corporate customers at Tenet and corporate at Cerner, but I haven't really spent much time at settings that actually provide care. And so I took a pretty significant pay cut and forced myself to kind of take a step back to go back to Cerner. And then I traveled to a hospital in Connecticut. And I spent a little over a year there just learning healthcare.
Yeah.
Because that allowed me to be a better leader, to know how IT really impacts or has the potential to impact. And it just gave me an appreciation that I don't think I would have been able to get. I would have reached a peak in my career. And I think that allowed me to kind of adjust my communication, have a better appreciation of the complexity within healthcare, and then tailor IT to kind of meet that need. And so I was at Cerner, really enjoying it, and Tenet called me and had an opportunity. It was an opportunity to get off the road because they're headquartered here in Dallas. And I came in at middle management. I was a director there. Started climbing the ladder. Again, it wasn't like the intent wasn't to climb the ladder. The intent was once I hit a peak, let's go do something else, right? So that I can be a better leader to the people that I lead. And eventually found myself in a position after you and I talked. I went back to grad school and finished that up in 2020. And I'm right when COVID was hitting, and I found myself thinking, kind of, what's next? Because I was getting a little comfortable, and I didn't want that complacency to set in again. Going back to the values of that we talked about earlier, and so Tenet was great to me. I worked for 3 different CIOs. Really appreciated what it introduced me to and how large organizations need to operate, which is scale, discipline, communication, just how important communication is, talking to different folks in different ways. And Surgery Partners came along, and I think the temptation to me, Ed, was I wanted to be part of the growth, so go for grow. The company was growing, and I wanted to be part of a growing organization. It was an opportunity to do something different and rebuild myself, going into a company where I virtually knew no one, coming from a place where I felt like I was getting comfortable. Everybody knew me and I knew them. So it was just a new challenge, a new opportunity. I wanted to see if I could do it again. And so been a little over 2.5 years and really enjoyed the ride so far.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, you know, one of the things that I want to just point out that you were talking about is that, you know, a lot of times we think about the career ladder. Okay, this step, I'm an analyst, I'm a manager, I'm a senior manager, I'm a vice president, AVP, assistant vice president, you know, we think very linear, but in your example, you made some lateral or even down moves to go further up. And people, that's a super important lesson. That's just why I want to highlight it. We have to think about it. I'm stealing this from a friend of mine. You may know him as well, Tom Andriola. He's at UC system. And he talks about it. Don't think about it as a ladder, but think about it as a rock climbing. Because sometimes like you rock climb, like you got to, or if you've ever visualized it, right? You might, that next hole might be too high. So you got to go to the side and down and around. And then eventually you get to the top and you summit. And that's exactly what you've done. That's so cool. Yeah, let's talk about Surgery Partners. So tell us a little bit about Surgery Partners.
Yeah, so we're a growing company, about 2.6, 2.7 billion in revenue. We have around 180 centers. Most of them are ambulatory surgical centers. We also have some outpatient clinics and around 19 short stay surgical hospitals. We're in 30 states. And our mission statement is to enhance the patient quality of life through partnership. And it's that latter part that I think is really appealing to me, is the partnership element. And so we partner with physician groups. We manage a lot of the back office, IT, human resources, supply chain, revenue cycle, et cetera, and allow physicians to do what they're really good at, which is and passionate about, which is spending more time in the OR rather than on the back office functions. And so that partnership element is really instilled within our culture. I look at all of my peers as partners. We work together on things. And so that's a little bit about Surgery Partners. The one other thing I'll mention is as a growing company, we've also recently started partnering with health systems. So we publicly announced a partnership with Intermountain and Methodist, as well as Ohio Health. And so that's a exciting part of our growth story as we diversify our customer base. And again, that partnership element rings true there as well.
Yeah, that's cool. So yeah, so if you're a big health system and you realize, because it's kind of a question I had for you, like, are we moving? I think we know we are moving towards outpatient more and more. So I won't ask you, are we moving? I think that's established. And so if you're a health system and you don't really have much of a presence, instead of building your own, you can partner with you all, right? And have these different outpatient surgery centers and stuff. Yeah, makes total sense. Yeah, so it was a leading question, so I don't really want to use that question specifically, but I mean, what do you think is the scope of healthcare? Like, and I know I'm putting you on the spot here, Varun, but well, everyone will give you a lot of grace on this number, but how much of today's care that's done, in a traditional setting, do you think we might see move towards more outpatient, not just surgery, but in general? I mean, are you thinking it's 25%, 50%, 75%? Where do you think we're headed as an industry, long term?
I mean, I think we'll go as far and stretch the boundaries as technology enables us. And what I mean by that is it comes down to your customer, the patient, and also the provider, right? If you think about it, where do you want to get, if you can do the same procedure and be in and out the same day versus a 3 or 4 or 5 night stay at a hospital, you're going to prefer that that outpatient setting. And your family will prefer it, especially if you have a caregiver, for example. And so I think as technology advances, anesthesia advances, we're going to continue to see this migration. And so, if you think about healthcare, you've got your patient, your provider, and then your payer, right? There's always this 3 triangle element. This is what makes healthcare a little bit unique, unlike retail, for example, where it's just your end customer and the product or service you provide. And so payers are also incentivized to go down this path, right?
Yes, right.
Healthcare is very expensive here, continues to grow at a really high rate, and this is a solution towards that. And so I think as it becomes safe to take procedures and moving from an inpatient to outpatient, all the incentives from the patient to the provider to the payer are aligned to move in this direction.
Yeah, especially with like you're saying, with value-based care and all the changes going on, this definitely plays. I won't press you on a percentage. My percentage is kind of like like 80%. I think in the future we'll see, because we're getting better at all this. That there will be new technology that enables this. I think the payer, the funding mechanism, they'll kind of be shifting from the more expensive inpatient type care over to outpatient. And the early indicators are yeah, and I have some experience with it as well. When I was at the clinic, when we moved a lot of things virtual, customer experience, member experience is higher. To your point, cost is lower. Um, the quality was the same or better because now when you're like convalescing and you're around loved ones, you talked earlier about the barbershop. You're around loved ones all the time, and you're not being poked at 1 a.m. or whatever. It's not noisy. All those different things. It's just it's just logically, it just makes all the sense in the world. So, Varun, you've now have had this great experience. You worked on the vendor side, Cerner, and you've worked as a service provider, but you've also now have outpatient experience as an IT leader and inpatient, right? When you're a tenant. Is there much of a difference between the two different types of IT? Because some people might want to know, like if they're in one or the other, it's like, oh, I wonder what it's like over there. Is it the same or what?
Yeah, so I support a blend. So we do have hospitals as well, short stay surgical hospitals, and so we do have a part of the business that's 24/7, where people can walk in through the ER, for example, and the ailment could be anywhere from one extreme to another. And on the flip side, we've got outpatient surgeries, which are much more predictable. They're scheduled in advance. And so I think if I was going to compare the outpatient side, I would say it's going to be more business hours driven. Right. Also, the meaningful use incentives that were in place for acute care didn't always apply to that outpatient setting, right? And so you see a lack of investments most organizations have made in the outpatient space, whereas those incentives were and our penalties were being taking place in the acute care. And so you've seen, virtually every acute care system that I know of has a strong digital ecosystem for electronic medical records. Whereas I think within our outpatient settings, it's a bit of a hybrid approach. And so I think it's just more predictable, more business hours driven, and it's a simpler operating model than we find at a hospital.
Yeah, I have friends who they may be part of surgery, as far as I'm not sure. And my wife as well as a clinician, and the lifestyle is much better because it was. I mean, even in IT, I would surmise based on what you're sharing. But I know as a clinician, from a clinician point of view, the lifestyle of my clinician friends who do these type of surgeries, outpatient facilities and things like that, they have the lifestyle is much better, quality of life sort of thing. So it's like a win-win all around. Varun, is there any sort of, and of course, we're not bashing inpatient. I just want to be clear about that with all of our listeners. It's very important as well to take care of the sickest of the sick, and there's certain things that have to be done there, and the people that serve there are awesome. So not saying anything negative, but just saying, hey, here's some of the things you might not have thought about on the more outpatient facility side. So, are there any cool technologies that you've deployed or are deploying, or maybe something in the future, that you're doing?
Yeah, we're certainly experimenting with different things like artificial intelligence, generative AI, and things that you'll hear just about any tech conference out there. But I almost think about like us, if we can focus on the fundamentals first and get really good in terms of our processes, then I think we can then I'm convinced that we're as efficient as we can be and as productive as we can be. And if I can do those things, it opens up the door to do more innovation out there. And so my first 2.5 years have been focused on taking a look at our processes, which as a high M&A company can vary, and thinking about how we can be as lean as possible, right? So let's eliminate waste, because waste creates turnover. People aren't happy. It's not meaningful work. And so we start with eliminating waste wherever possible. And then we think about, okay, is this work transactional? Is it predictable and repeatable? If the answer is yes, we're going to automate that. And so we have done a ton of automation, and that's allowed our staff to focus on areas that are more relevant, where we need decisions made, instead of doing the same process on a routine basis. We do a lot of communication within our organization, both top down as well as bottoms up. And the bottoms up is sort of tell us about what you like, what you don't like, where there's opportunities. And that feedback was reinforced in that, we think there's opportunities for us to be doing more meaningful work. And so that automation journey has been really key for us. But automation is just then, the last step of it. First is, do you have the right process? Then is it as efficient as it can be? Can you natively solve for it within the native system, or natively integrate it with whatever systems it talks to? And once you've exhausted all those options is where kind of automation comes in for us. And it's been a worthy endeavor for us so far.
Yeah, that's good. And you bring up a really good point, because oftentimes we want to rush into the bright, shiny objects, do like really far out things, which is cool, but you got to take care of the fundamentals first and have everything, working well and doing the automation, the efficiencies and things like that. And then that allows you the ability to do this other stuff that you can then scale. Because
That's right.
when people rush, they can't scale. So they have a little bit here and the rest of this is like all messed up. So like, forget this, work on the base is the foundation. So that's a really good point. So I want to sort of end up our time talking about leadership, although you've been dropping leadership nuggets throughout the last few minutes. What's the hardest thing about your role? So, again, someone who's thinking about, wow, Varun, he was like me, he was a manager and he became senior manager, worked his way up, or not worked his way up, but kind of did those rock climbing moves to get to where he is. What would you say is a hard part about your role?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier about people, process, and technology, and now I've graduated to the people phase, right? It doesn't mean I don't spend as much time on technology and as much on processes, but it's about building relationship, understanding the business, right? Really understanding where the headwinds are, where there's tailwinds, understanding the strategy. I think the more closer you can be connected to the business, the better off you can be a better leader back to your teams. But I think the toughest part for me, Ed, and this is both professional and personal, is I'm a people person now, and relationships are really important. And when I was young in my career, I was always up for kind of doing new things, right? But eventually you hit a point where now you're hitting bottlenecks where you cannot have that funnel be as large because it's impossible to meet with, 20 ads a week, for example, right? And so it's really about nurturing the relationships that are reciprocal. I've had to go back and think through that. Where's the reciprocal relationships? Because the best relationships can never be one way. And then two, learning what not to do, and not saying yes to everything. Which, when you're ambitious and you're young, like some of your audience might be, that's when you're just trying to learn as much as you can and connect as much as you can. But eventually that can take a wear and tear on you and family and other commitments. And so it's really about trying to rationalize and make sure that the relationships are authentic, genuine, and that, we continue to go deeper as opposed to broader.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned family and not getting sort of burned out and things like that. Are there any tricks that you have that, especially because you took on this new role and stuff and more responsibility, higher profile? And is there anything that you've learned along the way that you would pass on? Like, this is it is one trick, one hack that I use to like have an integrated life.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you asked that. I was talking to a mentee the other day, and we talked about the same thing. And when I'm the happiest, it's when the company values and my values align, because I can be myself. And I know it's as often as you hear that advice, it's because it's so true. Right? And so to me, it's the professional and the personal lives blending together. And that makes it not feel like work. It makes it feel like a mission.
Yeah.
And the company's mission, I mentioned to you earlier, is to enhance the patient quality of life through partnership. Partnerships are really important to me and a value that I have. And so those kinds of things don't make it feel like work. They feel like a mission. And so I think finding an organization that where your values align, and one that's growing, because growth creates opportunities, are really kind of key and important if you're ambitious.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I like that a lot. Wow, we've talked about a lot already, Varun, in less than 30 minutes. Is there something we missed or anything you want to double down on? I'll leave you with the last word.
Yeah, growing up in Iowa, I'm a Iowa Hawkeye football fan and basketball. That was the only sport that we have. We don't have any professional teams there. And I use this analogy a lot at my work, which is if you think about the Midwest schools, they don't get the best talent, right? They don't, they're low population states. They're not going to get your 5-star recruits. And healthcare is like that, where your top AI, cybersecurity, you name it, they're likely going to, your Googles, your Facebooks, or Amazon, and those types of opportunities. And so Iowa, what makes them really special is that they recruit these under-recruited people, and they focus on the fundamentals, and they develop them where they go on to be NFL players.
Yeah.
And so I think part of a leader's responsibility, whether you're a leader of people or just a leader in subject matter expertise, is to help those around you be better. And when you can do that, you yourself will become better.
Yeah.
Because you're learning from them. And so I would just challenge all of us. Healthcare IT needs us. Make the people you work with better around you, help them become that 5-star talent. And that'll help you go places, because people will take notice that you are building productive teams, and those teams are now self-sufficient, which then allow you to do the things around innovation and exciting areas, as well as allowing that talent to graduate and hopefully become that NFL player somewhere else and go on to be a CIO somewhere else if that's their aspirations. And so that's been sort of my value system just growing up in the Midwest, and I've had success with it, and hopefully that helps your audience.
Yeah, Varun, that was awesome. I love it. I'm gonna steal that one myself. So I'll give you a little credit, maybe. No, you've been fascinating. You're a great leader. I'm so thrilled for your success, and I appreciate you again sharing with our audience very transparently. And your organization, Surgery Partners, lucky to have you. So thanks for being on the show.
All right, thanks, Ed. Always a
Right.
pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. That wraps up EDTalks. Thanks for listening.